All right, so we'll talk about externalities. We'll try to define that, and we'll see how externalities will cause problems to the market outcome. And then we'll look at what kind of public policies can solve these problems of externalities. And even we'll see if people can try to solve this problem on their own. So that's private solutions. So externalities. So this is one type of market failure, and it's because the market activity would influence bystanders. That's the problem. However, it's not paid for, or the bystander does not pay or receive compensation for this effect. And so that's why it's called externality. It's this effect on somebody else outside of the market. So there could be negative externalities. That means that you're harming the bystander. But also it could be positive. So that means that it's beneficial to the bystander, but the bystander is not paying for that. Okay, and the problem here is that if buyers and sellers are self-interest, they would not take into account these external effects of the bystanders, but because of that, the market outcome would not be the socially efficient outcome. So that's why one of the 10 principles is government action can sometimes improve upon market outcomes. And because sometimes we'll see why sometimes markets would fail to allocate resources efficiently, and we'll see how government policy can potentially improve these outcomes. And we'll compare different policies and see which one is likely to work best. So, okay, this is a recap of welfare economics. So this is the market for copy paper. You have a demand curve. This is the private value, the value of the buyer, the price they're willing to pay for copy paper. And then you have the supply curve, which is the private cost, the cost that directly incurred by the sellers to provide or to produce and sell the copy paper. And here we have the market equilibrium at a price of 150 NT dollars per ream, and the market is going to sell 25 reams of copy paper per day. And the market equilibrium is where you maximize total surplus, or the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus. Now, what are examples of negative externality? Pollution, air pollution. Residents that live next to a factory will be affected by air pollution. There could be water pollution. I'm not sure if you saw the news where some of these companies, even though they're high-tech companies, they pollute the water. And so you'll see these crazy colors of water that's affecting the residents next to those factories. So that's a problem. If you live in a dorm, you might know this. The dorm next door is having a party at midnight and you want to sleep. That's a negative externality. I heard that there are some crazy dorms where your roommate will bring his girlfriend back to the room. That's also negative externalities to the roommates of that person. If you live outside, you might have these dogs that bark at night when you're sleeping, then you're waking up. For people in my age, it's difficult to go back to sleep after you're woken up like that, and that's a problem. Noise pollution. When there's construction projects next door, then things become very loud. Maybe that's why having AirPods Pro or some kind of noise cancellation headphones are important. But sometimes this noise pollution is so big that it's not easy. Yeah. Secondhand smoke. I'm not sure if you noticed that. So on campus, you're not allowed to smoke, but there could be people who violate that. Even bigger problem is that people would stand right outside of the campus and smoke, but the smoke would still come in. So if your offices happen to be next to the boundary of the university, you might still experience secondhand smoke. That's also negative externality, because if I smoke, I'm enjoying my cigarette, but the bystander that's next to me is going to be harmed, and I'm not compensating these bystanders for the secondhand smoke. I'm not sure if you've seen people try to cross the crossroad and then texting or talking on the phone. Talking on the phone might be okay because you will be still looking around, but if you text and you walk, then it's likely that you will not be paying attention of your surrounding. You'll bump into people or get hit by a bicycle or by a car. If you're texting when you're driving, then that's even worse, right? I mean, you're driving a car and you'll run into other people. So again, so you're enjoying this benefit of communicating on social media or whatever mean, but you are creating this danger to the pedestrians or to other people, and you're affecting the effect of bystanders. Vaccines. Oh, I love this. Okay, so declining to be vaccinated against contagious disease such as measles impose costs on other people, which is a negative externality. So do you agree or disagree? And do you think economists agree or disagree? One thing I do want to say is that this survey on economists was done back in 2015, so this is way before the pandemic, but it still reflects the views of economists in general. But because of the COVID-19, I believe things will be drastically different now, but let's look at their results. Okay, first thing, do you agree or disagree? Declining to be vaccinated against contagious disease, such as measles, impose costs on other people, which is negative externality. So you can strongly agree, agree, uncertain, disagree, strongly disagree, no opinion, or I think you can also prefer not to answer, and that's okay. Here we see that the majority of the people who responded agree, some even strongly agree. There are still people who disagree or are not sure, that's okay. This is expressing your opinion. The next part is a prediction. So do you think when the panel surveyed economists, did they agree or disagree or be not sure? So do economists agree or disagree? So declining to be vaccinated against contagious disease, such as measles, impose costs on other people, which is negative externality. Agree or disagree? And yeah, so I believe if next time the survey was done, it's likely that the example will be such as COVID-19, because that's what's affecting all of us nowadays. And of course, whether or not you should be vaccinated, that's a big problem. Okay. So 15 of you say 100%, 30 of you said 50 to 99%, some say less than 49%, and the answer is 100%. So let's take a look. So, yeah, so 100% economists agree that declining to be vaccinated against contagious disease is negative externality. All right, so with negative externality, you have what we call social costs. Social cost includes two things. One is the private cost. This is the cost that's directly imposed on the seller. So it's already reflected in the supply curve. But then there's this external cost. So this is the value of this negative impact on the bystander. And that part is not reflected in the supply curve. And that's the problem. So suppose, let's go back to the market for copy paper. You have an external cost. So that's the value of the negative impact on bystanders, say 60 NT dollars per ream. So this is the value of the harm, like say water and air pollution that's created for producing this copy paper. So the social cost, this blue line, is the sum of this private cost plus the external cost. In our example, the external cost is the same. It's 60 NT dollars regardless of the quantity of supplied. It could be different, but in our example, the simple example, it's $60 fixed. So what's going to happen here? So the original equilibrium is now no longer the social optimal, because now the social cost is actually higher than what's reflected in the supply curve. So the socially optimal quantity is only 20 reams of paper per day, because that's where social benefit, which is reflected in the demand curve, equals to the social cost that's reflected in the social cost curve. If you have a quantity that's below 20, the value for one additional ream of copy paper exceeds the social cost. For any quantity that's above 20, including the equilibrium quantity of 25, well, the social cost of the last ream is actually higher than the buyer's willingness to pay, the buyer's value of consuming this last rim of paper. So that's why the market equilibrium outcome may be inefficient or may not be maximizing the total surplus. And to fix this, the key thing, because it's called externality, to fix this, you have to internalize these externalities or let them pay. So basically, if you can change the incentives, force people to take into account these external costs, then that solves the problem. For example, in our simple example, it's very easy, right? You know the external cost is 60 NT dollars per rim. Just tax the sellers 60 NT dollars per rim. Then you're shifting the supply curve up by exactly the external cost, and so that your supply curve will coincide with the social cost curve. And then the market equilibrium will go back to maximizing total surplus. And so the market equilibrium will achieve the social optimal. So let's take a look. So here is original market equilibrium at 25, the social cost curve. So the market equilibrium outcome of equilibrium quantity 25 exceeds the socially optimal quantity of 20. But if you tax sellers $60 per rim, you're shifting the supply curve up by exactly $60. And so that would solve the problem. Now you're restoring social optimal and being equal to the market equilibrium. So this is two wrongs become right? Initially, taxation, we just saw in our experiment, is bad, but externalities are also bad. But what you can do is you can use, because externality is bad in this way, so you use taxations to fix it. There is a catch here, which is you have to know exactly the amount of the external cost and tax exactly the same amount. If you misjudge that, then you might overshoot or undershoot, and you will not be able to exactly restore the social optimal at the new market equilibrium. Okay, so going back to vaccines, so consider the cost of restricting free choice. The share of people in the US who choose not to vaccinate their children for measles, the social benefit of mandating measles vaccines for all Americans, except those with compelling medical reasons, would exceed the social cost. This is also a question asked back in 2015. So you can imagine if now we will be asking about, should we mandate everybody to be vaccinated for COVID-19? Hopefully we'll get an update on that. But do you agree or disagree with this statement? And do you think economists, when surveyed back in 2015, would agree or disagree with this statement? So do you agree or disagree? Consider the cost of restricting free choice, the share of people in the US who choose not to vaccinate their children for measles, the social benefit of mandating measles vaccines for everybody except those with compelling medical reasons would exceed the social cost. Okay, so the majority of you agree, or some strongly agree. There's still people who disagree and strongly disagree. That's okay. The next one is the quiz. So let's see. So do economists agree or disagree with the same statement? 100% agree, 50 to 99%, 1 to 59%, 0%, or don't know. Okay, so let's look at your answers. So 7 of you say 100%, 43 of you say 50 to 99%, 3 say less than 50%. It's okay to don't know, but the answer is between 50 to 99%. Let's look at the survey result. So 89% agree with this statement. The social benefit for mandating measles vaccines exceed the social cost, but there's still 6% unsure, 5% disagree. But I do want to say, yeah, so vaccination is a real problem, especially now well, should we mandate people to take the COVID vaccines? Now we already have these travel restrictions that, oh, so you have to be vaccinated with full dose or only with these vaccines, but not others. Different countries have different restrictions on that. So the question, of course, is that good or is it not? And this is very important now also because the rich countries already have a vaccination rate that exceeds 60%. Taiwan, I think, is heading towards first dose 70%, but the second dose is still in the 20% somethings, but people are getting vaccinated every day. I think it's like at least 300,000 per day. But suppose we reach 60% or 80% vaccination. Should we mandate that the remaining 20% all should be vaccinated unless they have some medical reason? That is a real problem. And because not everybody can be vaccinated. The vaccines are not designed for babies, for example. All right, so enough for that talk. But being vaccinated against contagious disease is positive externalities. If you think of it, well, suppose all of you get vaccinated. I'm not vaccinated, but I'm protected by you guys because all of you guys are vaccinated, right? So you guys would not get COVID-19 and you would not spread the disease to me. But if you choose to be vaccinated, well, there could be side effects. If you're unlucky, you might even die because of these side effects. But at least, well, a lot of people, even if you don't die because of vaccination, you would get a fever. Some people just describe that it's like being run over by a car. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure anybody survives being run over by a car to compare that with the experience of being vaccinated? But yeah, so these side effects are real. The cost for being vaccinated is real. So you are not only protecting yourself, you're also protecting people around you. So actually, some people say that, yeah, you should be vaccinated to protect your family, especially if you have young children or babies in the house because they can't be vaccinated. So being vaccinated, you are creating a positive externality on other people. Research of new technology, that's also creating positive externalities. If you think of it, the inventor of AZ, they actually gave up the patent, at least for the first couple million doses, to make sure that the vaccines could actually go to more people. And so they are creating this positive externality for developing this technology. Even more people going to college, you could reduce crime and improve the government and so on. This is also a positive externality because for people who don't go to college, they still receive this benefit. NTU actually owns a lot of historical buildings, and it's always a problem that you don't have the money to restore them. But if you restore a historical building, you are creating positive externalities because once this historical building is restored, not only you will be happy about that or can enjoy this historical building, but all the visitors can also enjoy this historical building. I'm not sure if you would want to own a fire extinguisher at home, but having a fire extinguisher at home is creating positive externality because if there's a fire, if your neighbor's house is caught fire, you can grab your extinguisher and try to help your neighbor. So these are examples of what we call positive externalities, where the transaction or this behavior is creating a good effect on bystanders that the bystander is not paying for. So compared to negative externality where we have social cost, here with positive externality, we're talking about social benefit. So the social value of a good includes not only the private value, which is the value to the buyer directly, that's already reflected in the demand curve, but here you have external benefit, the value of the positive impact on the bystanders that is not reflected in the private value. I think the best example for this is wearing a mask. If all of you are wearing a mask, I could just take my mask off because all of you are protecting me from this disease. And so wearing a mask not only protects yourself, it also helps protecting people next to you. Because now, even if you sneeze, you're not spreading the virus. So if you draw this, what you get is that, so the demand curve reflects the private value of this product. Like say here we have a market for flu shots. Then the external value would reflect the value for helping or the impact on bystanders. For example, here, let's say the external benefit for a flu shot is $100 per shot. So your social value would be the private value plus this external benefit. So you're basically you're shifting the demand curve up by exactly the amount of the external benefit. In this simple example, it's $100 regardless, and that will be the social value curve. And so just like the social cost curve, when it differs from the supply curve, you create problems for the market. When the social benefit is different from the demand curve, you have a problem. Here, the market equilibrium is 20 flu shots at a price of $200, but the market equilibrium of 20 flu shots is lower than the socially optimal quantity of 25 flu shots. That's where the social value curve intersects with the supply curve. And so just like you could tax negative externalities, one way to fix this, if you can correctly estimate the external benefit, is to subsidize the buyers exactly the amount of the external benefit. And so then you shift the demand curve up by $100. And so then the market equilibrium would again coincide with the social optimal. There is a reason why the government is subsidizing flu shots, especially for the people who with the age above 65 or people with young children and so on. But of course, one problem is that it's very difficult to estimate what's the right external benefit, so what's the right subsidy to provide. And I think in Taiwan, what we do is that all of the flu shots are free. The vaccination for COVID is also free, if you can sign up in time or find the right place to sign up. But of course, it's debatable whether or not that amount of subsidy exactly equals to the external benefit that these vaccines are creating. It's likely an overshoot, and of course that means that it may or may not be good enough. Okay, so to summarize, if you have negative externalities, the market equilibrium would be greater than what's socially desirable. If you have positive externality, the market quantity will be smaller than what's socially desirable. And to solve this, the key thing is you need to internalize this externality. And so one good way is to tax the goods with negative externalities and subsidize goods with positive externality. All right, so now, given we talked about externalities, we'll look at different public policies towards externality. The first one is what we call command and control. That's say we just regulate directly. That's requiring certain behavior or forbidding certain behavior. For example, you say, oh, you cannot exceed this amount of pollution. Or all cars would have to have this green technology to reduce air pollution or things like that. And the problem here is that it's impossible to prohibit all pollution. And it's costly to enforce these requirements because you have to check. There are all these news articles about companies secretly polluting the water or polluting the air when governmental officials are not looking, and then you have to report to those. Even you say no smoking on campus, well, some people might secretly stand in a place where nobody's looking and then try to smoke. So setting a maximum level of pollution, requiring firms to adopt particular technology, and so on. All right, so I think we'll stop here and we'll look at the next one is these alternative policies and then try to compare them. Last time we talked about externalities, so now we shall continue on externalities. We talked about public policies towards externality. The first one that we considered was command and control. And now we're going to move on to more market-based public policies. So now we shall start first with a Ask the Experts survey question. Here's the question. So the Brookings Institute recently described a US carbon tax of $20 per ton, increasing at 4% per year, which would raise an estimated $150 billion per year in federal revenue over the next decade. And so the question asking the economist is, given the negative externality created by carbon dioxide emissions, a federal carbon tax at this rate would involve fewer harmful net distortion to the US economy than a tax increase that generates the same revenue by raising marginal tax rates on labor income across the board. So the question is, do you agree or disagree with this statement? We talked about taxes already. It's a distortion, but there are pros and cons on this. But if you tax something that has negative externality, then you could actually restore efficiency. So the first question is, do you agree or disagree with this statement? And the second question is, do you think economists would agree or disagree with this statement? All right, so let's start. Okay, so we see the results coming in, and we have a lot of people saying they agree, some strongly agree. Okay, so now we'll go to the real challenge, which is, do you think economists would agree or disagree? So it's the same question, same statement, but do you think economists agree or disagree with this statement? 100% agree, 50 to 99%, 1 to 49%, 0%, or don't know. So 5 of you say 100%, majority of you say 50 to 99, some say 1 to 49, and let's look at the answer. And the answer is between 50 to 99%. Let's look at this. Here is the actual data. So 98% of the economists surveyed either strongly agree or agree with this statement. 2% are not sure, but nobody disagrees. So if you look at this, yeah, nobody disagrees. All right, so now we're going to look at what we call market-based policies. The idea, remember, the problem for externalities is that there are costs, there are benefits that are not considered. So the goal of the solution is to internalize this externality. So now we're going to look at what are the market-based policies that you could try to internalize these externalities so that private incentives and social efficiency could be aligned again. And here, just by looking at this title, market-based policies, that you know that the traditional idea that externalities is one of what we call market failure is wrong. Because if it's a market failure, how could you find a market-based solution? I mean, if you have a market-based policy that could solve market failure, then it's not a failure of the market. In fact, it's actually a failure for not having a market. We do not have a market for clean air, for clean water, and so that's why pollution is a problem. If we can price clean air, clean water, then pollution is priced, then it's not a problem. But anyway, okay, so that's the interesting issue when we usually call this market failure, but then we come up with market-based policies. So it's somehow contradictory. Okay, so let's look at this. The idea here is that if you have these market-based policies where private decision makers can choose to solve this problem on their own, then externality goes away. So first we'll look at what we call corrective taxes and subsidies. And so carbon tax is one of the good examples of this. And then we'll look at tradable pollution permits. Yeah, so this is a new idea. Instead of just taxing it directly, why don't we just try to create permits, and then you can only pollute if you have the permits and have people trade. That's creating a market for pollution. And the whole idea for this is to internalize externality. Suppose something has negative externality, then what you can do is just tax that same amount. And of course, that forces people to internalize this externality. At the end of last week's lecture, we showed an example of this. And also, similarly, if this is something that has positive externality, then what you can do is you can subsidize this. I believe last week's lecture I talked about, well, vaccination is an activity that has positive externality. I just had a friend was asking online that, oh, my father has these heart disease, high blood pressure. Should he take the second dose of Moderna? Well, I mean, that's a common question across the board. You can imagine different people asking, oh, if I'm a young woman, pregnant, should I take AZ? And the problem for this is that there is benefit beyond yourself for being vaccinated because people around you will also be protected. But you bear the consequences. If you are the 1 in a million chance person that you got this severe side effect, then that's a problem. Even if you don't have these severe side effects, most people after being vaccinated for COVID, they get a fever for a couple of days or they feel tired and so on. And so here you have this activity that has positive externality for the whole society because it's good if everybody is vaccinated, but individuals have to pay this cost. And in fact, I could try to free ride you, right? I mean, if you guys are all vaccinated, then I don't have to get vaccination because I'm protected, because you guys are protecting me. So the ideal way to solve this is to have a corrective subsidy that exactly equals to the amount of the external benefit. And so then you basically force people to internalize this external benefit, and that would solve the problem. So this is usually called Pigovian tax, after the economist Pigou, who first proposed this idea. So because now people are taking into account this negative externality or positive externality, so now things are back to socially optimal. And of course, as I said, the key challenge here is you have to have this Pigovian tax exactly equal to the external cost. If you overshoot or undershoot, then you cannot restore the social optimal or efficiency. But what it does, it effectively places a price on the right to pollute. If you want to pollute, okay, but you have to pay this tax. This is the price tag for pollution. And well, compared to the command and control direct regulation, where you force everybody to follow the same rules, well, this actually can reduce pollution at a lower cost for the whole society. And so it's better. And it also provides revenue for the government. If you think of carbon tax, so instead of raising income tax, we could raise carbon tax and to reduce pollution and also raise tax revenue for the government. So that's usually why we think this is a good idea. And of course, because you are internalizing externality, you are restoring economic efficiency. Yeah, so usually taxes could be bad because you are distorting the market. But for corrective taxes, you can actually restore efficiency through these corrective taxes. Okay, so the key thing here is this. Because you're placing a price on pollution, so suppose you have an abatement cost. So to prevent this pollution, you have a cost much lower. What you can do is instead of paying the tax, what you can do is you can actually decide to pay this abatement cost and prevent this pollution from happening. So for all of the factories, the companies, the firms that have a pollution prevention cost that's below this corrective tax, they would try to prevent pollution to the highest extreme because it's less costly for them to just prevent this pollution compared to paying the tax. But for the firms that have a high abatement cost, so their cost of preventing this pollution is above this corrective tax, what they can do is they can say, okay, so I pay the tax and I just keep polluting. But because these firms don't stop pollution, But the other firms that have lower costs will be preventing even more pollution. So the total amount of pollution prevention can be the same, but you are having the low-cost firms doing pollution prevention. And so in terms of the overall efficiency of preventing pollution, well, it's much better. Compared to regulation, where you require that all firms will have to do the same thing. You have to reduce up to this amount. And then, of course, the high-cost firms will have to pay the high cost to prevent pollution, and the low-cost firms will have to pay low cost. So the high cost is higher. And if the low-cost firm prevented even more pollution, it's much better for the society, but that's not happening. So the key thing here is that if you want equality, well, regulation gives you equality. Everybody is subjected to the same standards. But in terms of efficiency, what you really want is, given the same amount of pollution reduction, you want the low-cost firms to do this instead of the high-cost firms. Okay, so here's one good example for corrective tax. This is gasoline. There's the gas tax. So this is corrective tax targeting 3 negative externalities. So first, congestion, because the more you drive, the more you contribute to congestion. If you ever ride your motorcycle to school in Taipei City, you would see this. Morning 7 to 9 o'clock, evening 5 to 7, you see congestion, so that's obvious. The other one is accidents. If you drive a larger vehicle, then you'll be causing more damage in accidents. Well, if you think of it, riding your motorcycle, well, even if you run into an accident, the damage to other people is smaller than if you drive a truck or a SUV and so on. So that's also externality caused on whoever gets hit by you. And then there's also pollution. I mean, the more fossil fuel you burn, the more pollution that you're going to create. And of course, that's both for global warming and also for people's health. I mean, there are more and more cases of lung cancer, and then people suspect these environmental factors are causing this. Okay, but in any case, congestion, accidents, and pollutions, these are 3 different negative externalities that gasoline tax is actually trying to target. The actual gas tax in the US is only 50 cents per gallon. And the optimal, when economists calculate this, is like close to $3. You can try to compare the numbers in Taiwan, but usually the challenge is that people hate the gas tax, but actually it should be even higher than what it currently is. And the key thing here is that consuming gasoline, you're basically creating a lot of different types of negative externality. Okay, so next survey question to economists. Here's the statement. A tax on the carbon content of fuels will be less expensive way to reduce carbon dioxide emissions than would a collection of policies such as corporate average fuel efficiency requirements for automobiles. The idea here is to compare carbon tax versus this command and control regulation that, like, say, all cars would have to be at least this efficient. Well, if you say at least this efficient, what's going to happen is that people don't have incentives to further improve efficiency. You just have to meet the minimum requirement. So do you agree or disagree that carbon tax will be less expensive way to reduce carbon dioxide emission? Or do economists agree or disagree with this statement? So okay, so let's start the survey. So do you agree or disagree with this statement? And so here we have different list choices: strongly agree, agree, uncertain, disagree, strongly disagree, or no opinion. And of course, you can choose prefer not to answer. All right, so here we see that the majority of you would say you agree, but there's also uncertainty and strongly disagree. It's okay to disagree here, this poll, so you can express your opinions. Now we'll go to the prediction question. So when the panel surveyed the economists, do economists agree or disagree with this statement? So it's 100% agree, 50 to 99% agree, 1 to 49% agree, 0% agree, or don't know. Okay, time's up. Some of you say 100% agree. The majority of you say 50 to 99% agree. Some say 1 to 49%. And the answer is indeed 50 to 99%. Actually, we can take a look at the survey results over here. It's actually 95% of the economists surveyed agree with this statement, that carbon tax is better than this regulation. 3% are not sure, 2% disagree. Okay, so we saw corrective taxes. That's one way to solve this negative externality problem. Now we'll look at the other way, which is tradable pollution permits. Actually, this is my favorite. I actually gave an exam question on this even the first time I taught this class. So let's take a look at how this works. The key thing is that this helps us reduce pollution at a lower cost than regulation, because if you have a low cost to prevent this pollution, what you could do is you can make money by selling the pollution permits that you get to somebody else at a higher price. And because you have a low cost of preventing pollution, so you can pay that cost and prevent the pollution, but then make money because you're selling at a higher price. And the high cost firms, what you do, instead of reducing pollution, you go on the tradable pollution permit market and just buy permits, and so you don't have to prevent pollution. So basically, you are having the low-cost firms preventing the pollution for you. And then here we have a market to make this happen. And the result is that, so the whole society is still preventing the same amount of total pollution, but it's done by the low-cost firms. So conditional on the same goal, we need to prevent this amount of pollution. Well, this market-based solution basically allows the society to do this with the lowest cost firm. And one thing that's interesting is that regardless of how these permits are allocated, that does not affect the outcome in terms of economic efficiency. Maybe I shouldn't tell you the secret, but the experiment that we will be running will try to drive this point home. So we'll see. Okay, so let's look at an example for this. Actually, this is one of the midterm questions back in 2007. That's the first time I taught this class. So back then, I saw this news that Frank Xie Changting, was then the mayor of Kaohsiung City. And he tried to clean the environment, especially to clean Love River, Aihe. And the problem for Love River, there were all these pig feeding factories or households at the upstream. They just dump all these water pollution into the river. So what Frank Xie did was he basically bought out all of these pig feeding factories and households. So basically he said, I'll pay everybody, each of you, how much money, and please leave your current location and move to some place that would not pollute Love River. And immediately I saw, wait a minute, if you're paying everybody the same price, to move everybody away, you have to pay everybody the highest cost among all of these people. Could you do something similar, but at a lower cost? And then I ran into this chapter, and I said, hey, this would be a good example. Okay, so let's look at this hypothetical example. So Ace Pig and Big Fat Piggy, these are two pig feeding factories that are polluting Kaohsiung's Love River. So they dump 100 tons of globe per month into the river. You guys might be too young to remember, but if you come from Kaohsiung City and you remember the old days, you basically cannot get close to Love River because it just stinks. And so the goal here is we want to reduce this pollution amount by 100 tons. So initially it's 200 tons. Now we want to reduce it to only 100 tons. Here's the cost of reducing the pollution. Ace Pig, it's 1 million NT dollars per ton. And for Big Fat Piggy, it's only 50,000 NT dollars per ton. So we have a high-cost firm and a low-cost firm. So which one is more efficient? Regulation or using a tradable pollution permit? Let's take a look. Okay, so let's look at the first policy. Regulation. Both firms are polluting 100 tons. Each of you cut pollution by 50 tons. Very fair, right? So compute the cost for each firm for reducing pollution by 50 tons and the total cost to achieve this policy. Okay, so now let's look at these numbers. So the cost of reducing pollution, one is 100 million NT dollars, the other is 50,000 NT dollars. Each firm should cut pollution by 50 tons. So what is the cost for Ace Pig to achieve this goal? Less or equal to 5 million, above 5 million, but less or equal to 20, above 20, but less or equal to 35, and so on. Okay, so a lot of you said above 35 million, but less or equal to 50 million. Nobody says less or equal to 5 million. Some of you say different answers. Let's see. And the answer is above 35 million, but less or equal to 50 million. So what about Big Fat Piggy? So again, we have the same cost. And the question is, Big Fat Piggy also has to cut pollution by 50 tons. So what is Big Fat Piggy's cost to achieve this? Okay, so a lot of you say less or equal to 5 million. Some say above 5 million, but less or equal to 20. Even more people say above 20, but less or equal to 35. Somebody said above 50. And the answer is actually less than 5 million. Okay, so last question. What is the total cost to achieve this goal of each firm reducing the pollution by 5 million? Ace Pig requires 1 million NT dollars per ton. Big Fat Piggy is only 50,000 per ton. Each firm has costs cut pollution by 50 tons. So what's the total cost for the whole society to achieve this goal? Okay, so time's up. The majority of you say above 50 million, and it is 50 million. All right, so let's take a look. For Ace Pig, the unit cost of reducing 1 ton of pollution is 1 million NT dollars. So 50 tons times 1 million, so it's 50 million NT dollars. That's why the answer is above 35 million, but less or equal to 50 million, because it's exactly $50 million. The cost for Big Fat Piggy, so because it's only 50,000 NT dollars per ton, multiplied by 50 tons, so that's only 2.5 million NT dollars per month. So here you see why the low-cost firm and the high-cost firm, there's this huge contrast. I purposely made these numbers very extreme, so you see that it's more efficient to have the low-cost firm to reduce pollution. And of course, the total cost is 50 million plus 2.5, so 52.5 million NT dollars. So that's why the last answer is correct. It's above 50 million NT dollars. All right, so now let's look at tradable pollution permits. So remember, the goal is to reduce total pollution by 100 tons. So the government says, how about this? Now I'm going to issue 100 permits. Each permit allows the permit holder to emit 1 ton of globe. So there are various ways to assign these permits. You can auction these off. You can give it to only one firm. And anyway, but here let's say the government says, let's just give 50 permits to each of the 2 firms. Let's make it fair. But then after giving out the permits, the government sets up a market for you to trade. So you can decide to buy or sell permits on this market. So you can use all of its permits to emit 50 tons. You can emit less than 50 tons and then sell the leftover permits. Or you can buy extra permits, and so you can emit above 50 tons. So now let's think of one scenario. If Big Fat Piggy decides to use 0 permits and sells 50 permits to Ace Pig, and for like say 200,000 NT dollars for each permit. So what is the cost of achieving the same goal of reducing 100 tons of pollution? Okay, so now let's start. So remember, the same cost, Ace Pig is 1 million NT dollars per ton, Big Fat Piggy is 50,000 NT dollars per ton. So each of you are polluting 100 ton, but you only have 50 permits. So say Big Fat Piggy decides to sell 50 permits to Ace Pig for 200 NT dollars each. So what is Big Fat Piggy's cost? Okay, so a lot of you say less or equal to 5 million. Some say above 5 but less than or equal to 20 million, and a few say above. And it is indeed less or equal to 5 million NT dollars. So what is Ace Pig's cost if Big Fat Piggy sells 50 permits to Ace Pig? Oh, yeah, and the price is 200,000 NT dollars. Yeah, somehow it's not showing up here. The answer is above 5 million, but less or equal to 20 million. So what is the total cost for the whole society to achieve this goal? Okay, so, and the answer is actually less or equal to 5 million. Not everybody got this, so let's look at this. So for Big Fat Piggy uses 0 permits, so he cannot pollute at all. So you sell 50 permits for 200,000 NT dollars each. So 50 times $200,000, so that's 10 million NT dollars. So it's gonna gain $10 million for selling the permits. But it would have to clean 100 tons of pollution, and this costs 50,000 NT dollars each, so times 100, so that's 5 million NT dollars. So the total cost is 5 million minus the 10 million that he sold, so it's actually negative 5 million NT dollars, because it actually is making money for selling all these permits. So here you see the power of the tradable pollution permit market, where so these low-cost firms, they could even make money. They sell the permits for $10 million. It only costs them $5 million to prevent this pollution, so they're making money. What about the high-cost firm? So let's look at Ace Pig. So Ace Pig is going to buy 50 permits from Big Fat Piggy. That costs $10 million. But now it has 100 permits, so it would do no pollution prevention. So it's going to still pollute 100 permits as usual. And so the total cost is only $10 million, the price that Ace Pig paid to buy the 50 permits. So both of these numbers are much smaller. Actually, one is even negative compared to the case of direct regulation. And the total cost for the whole society is minus 5 million plus 10 million, so it's only 5 million NT dollars. It's actually more than 10 times smaller than the total cost of using regulation directly. And the key thing is this. If you know that Big Fat Piggy is the low-cost firm, to reduce pollution, you should have Big Fat Piggy try to reduce as much as possible. So going from 200 to 100, well, the efficient solution for the society should be to have the low-cost firm, Big Fat Piggy, to reduce the pollution all the way and leave Ace Pig alone. But if you use regulation where you require both firms to reduce 50 tons of pollution, then that's not going to happen. But if you use the tradable pollution permit market, then you could actually induce this to happen. In the midterm question, I actually go on to ask follow-up questions, because here, this calculation is when we know that this firm is the low-cost firm, that firm is the high-cost firm. However, in reality, we do not know which firm has a higher pollution prevention cost. And in that case, because if we know, what we could do is we could just directly require, although it's not fair, but we can require the low-cost firm to reduce more. But then the low-cost firm will say, hey, wait a minute, why me? I mean, that's not fair. And all of the firms will not be willing to tell you the true cost of pollution prevention, because if they tell you they have a lower cost, then the government will ask them to reduce even more. But here, using the market, the government does not have to know the different costs of the firms. Well, as long as they're going to trade, if they trade voluntarily, then that reflects the outcome is that it's the low-cost firms that are going to sell the permits. Just like when you think of in the classroom experiment market that you experience, it's the sellers that have the lowest costs that are selling, and the buyers who have the highest value who are buying. Okay, so up to here, we talked about externalities and two market-based solutions. And so we can ask the different questions. So first, does Pigovian tax affect both buyers and sellers too? If so, what would happen if we tax the buyers, since taxing on either side has the same burden for both? So if you remember from our experiment last time, well, taxing the buyer and taxing the seller per unit tax will be the same thing. So if the same rule applies here, well, if like say for carbon tax, taxing the buyer and taxing the seller is literally the same thing. But in reality, I think the real challenge is it easier to tax the buyer or to tax the seller? If you think of, like, say, gasoline tax, there's only a handful of sellers of gasoline. In Taiwan, it's the Taiwan CPC and the FPC. There's only like two companies. And then, so there are thousands of gas stations around the place, but that's it. Compared to that, you have like millions of drivers, of consumers. So it's much easier to tax the gasoline companies or the gas stations compared to tax the consumers. But it is true, actually, Taiwan actually does charge a fuel tax on each of these cars. So every time you want to renew your car license plate, then you have to pay this fuel tax. But people are complaining that the fuel tax per car is not based on actual gasoline consumption. It's on what model your car is. And so in that sense, it's not really going to help you in terms of corrective taxes. Because even if you buy a truck, but you never drive it, you still pay the same tax, the same truck that's going to drive every day. So in Taiwan, we do try to tax the buyers of the car, but we're really taxing the car, not the gasoline. But to actually tax the gasoline, well, it's much easier to tax the gas stations and the gas companies compared to like millions of consumers. So the Pigovian tax affects both buyers and sellers, just like the standard tax. And so there's the tax incident or the tax burden shared by both sides. And so taxing either side is the same. But of course, in reality, what you want to do is you want to tax whichever party is easier to address. Okay, next one. Does total surplus still go down when the government taxes the seller and make the seller's costs meet the social optimum? Yeah, so the key thing here is that if you have negative externality, the original market outcome, if you have negative externality, the original market outcome is not efficient. But by taxing the exact amount of the external costs, you will be able to restore social optimum. And so in that sense, total surplus is maximized at that point. Because we're counting including this external cost. So not only consumer surplus, producer surplus, but also we need to reduce this external cost and to get the real total surplus for the whole society. Okay, what would happen if the government subsidizes more than the public value? Okay, so think about taxation. If you tax exactly the external cost, you restore social optimal, so you maximize total surplus. But if you overshoot or undershoot, the total surplus would always go down. Same thing for subsidy. So if you subsidize exactly the amount of external benefit, then yes, then you restore the social optimal. But if you overshoot or undershoot, then basically, you would be reducing total surplus because you are subsidizing too much or too few. And so the amount of consumption will be either too high or too low compared to the social optimal. Okay, next question. Isn't asking pig farmers to move just a way of telling them to bring their pollution somewhere else? Yeah, so that is a problem. But I do want to say that if the factory is right next to a river, it's very hard to monitor and prevent these factories from dumping wastewater into the river, like say at midnight or and so on. But if they move to someplace else, then this will not happen that easily, or it's much easier to monitor. I think that's the main issue. Officially, I mean, if your factory is next to a river, you're not supposed to dump wastewater into the river. But that happens, yeah. If you're from Kaohsiung, you might have more insider information that you can correct me. Okay, next one. Why didn't the government just tell the pig farmers not to dump their pig shit into the river? They should. Officially, you're not supposed to do that. The practical question is that when this is happening, of course, you can ask, why did none of the Kaohsiung mayors before Frank Hsieh did anything about it? I do believe that it's not that those mayors think it's okay or it's they can do that. Yeah, but with all their effort, nothing really changed until Frank Hsieh became the mayor of Kaohsiung. So yeah, so telling them to do that is what the government is always trying to do, but to actually solve the problem requires some serious economics. Next one, will we learn how to calculate societal value and the cost of externalities? Okay, I have to admit, not in this Principles of Economics class, because this is an introductory class. We will see this in the next chapter. This is what we call cost-benefit analysis. This itself is something that requires an entire course to try to do. And but it's usually not easy. Yeah. So to estimate the social value and social cost, this thing is not easy. And for this reason, I do prefer the tradable permit market, because the market price would determine what is the right the external cost or external benefit that's there. And so the market price would adjust according to the actual situation. While if you have a corrective tax, so you have to be God. You have to know the right cost or benefit to tax or subsidize the exact amount. So in the second big fat picky question, the figure on the right-hand side is wrong. Let's see. Okay, so let's try to go to that one. So ACEPIC buys permits, so the cost is 50 permits times, I know, it's 200,000. Oh, thank you very much. That I should correct. That is 200,000. But the 10 million is correct. Thanks for catching that. And then the 10 million plus minus 5. So 10 plus minus 5 is 5 million. Okay, so that part is correct. Thank you very much for catching this problem. Okay, so now we'll move on to what we call private solutions. So carbon tax. Carbon taxes are a better way to implement climate policy than cap and trade. So do you agree or disagree? And do economists agree or disagree? Do you agree or disagree with this statement? You can strongly agree, uncertain, disagree, strongly disagree, or have no opinion or not answer. The issue of carbon tax is a big thing nowadays. in reality. So that's why we have survey questions on this, both on you and on The Economist. All right, so let's move on to the next question. So do you think economists agree or disagree with this statement? 100% agree, 50 to 99% agree, 1 to 49% agree, 0% agree, or don't know. If you are not sure about carbon tax and cap and trade, you should Google this. Because of global warming, these are very hot topics that you can find answers about. And the answer is indeed between 50 to 99%. Let's take a look. So compared to the previous couple survey questions, 79% of economists agree, but 21% are not sure. So it's actually okay to disagree or to be uncertain, because even economists would have different opinions on these issues. Okay, so let's try to compare pollution permits versus corrective taxes. So reducing pollution using pollution permits or corrective taxes, either way, the firms pay for their pollution. So in that sense, this internalizes externality. So that's why it solves the problem. For corrective taxes, you pay the tax to the government. So the government loves this. Yay, I get to get money, right? So that's something that's good. But the firms can pollute as much as they want by paying this tax. So you have to tax it correctly. For example, that we saw the gas tax, which is way too low than the optimal corrective tax amount, which reflects the external cost. If the gas tax is so low, then no wonder people still drive like crazy. I mean, you should try to raise the gas tax to hit the right amount or to match the external costs. For pollution permits, firms pay to buy permits. And so they're paying each other. So in that sense, the government is not collecting taxes or any revenue from this. Or although the government could try to auction off these permits, we will see this in the next chapter, but when we get to common resources, for example, a lot of local governments, they would auction off these like hunter permits. So if you get a permit, then you can hunt a deer or a certain amount. And so using that, you could actually control how much prevent overfishing or overhunting. So you could auction off these pollution permits, and so that could also raise revenue. But in both cases, externality is internalized. Okay, so now we'll look at some objections. This is a late US senator's objection. We cannot give anyone the option of polluting for a fee. Paying for pollution is bad. I don't know, I mean, this is a value judgment, right? It's like last time we talked about it's not okay to buy or sell organs. So selling your kidney is not okay. Yeah, here's like selling the environment is not okay. The problem here is that you face trade-offs. I think if you want to eliminate all pollution, the only solution is to just eliminate the whole society, right? I mean, if humans go extinct, then there's no pollution anymore, right? So there is this trade-off that it's not that we can kill ourselves as a whole society and try to prevent pollution. So there is this trade-off so the question is how much cost you're willing to pay to achieve clean air and clean water. So if you want to have more of that, something has to give. So I think the response to this kind of objection is that it's already happening. It's just that if you think giving somebody the option to pollute for a fee is not acceptable, do you think it's acceptable that people have the option to pollute for free? I mean, that should be even less acceptable, right? Next one. Clean environment is a normal good. If you think of a normal good that has positive income elasticity, So rich countries can afford cleaner environment and have more rigorous environmental standards, regulations. And so developing countries, they have to pollute their environment. But if you think of it, clean air and clean water still obeys the law of demand. So if you have a lower price of environmental protection, then the more the society or the public will want it. And so if you can lower the cost of environmental protection using corrective taxes or pollution permits, then this actually promotes environmental protection. So I think the key thing here is that if you are an environmental protectionist, what you should do is not just let the evil capitalists use economics yourself to try to promote environmental protection. In that sense, I think it's good that economics is a tool that different people with different value judgments and goals can all try to use it to advance the goals. Okay, so up to here we thought about public policies to solve externalities. We saw regulation, we saw corrective taxes, and then we saw tradable pollution permits. Now we're going to what we call private solutions to externality. For example, moral code and social sanction. Like NTU students should not litter. Or if you want to see social sanctions, so you should look at the NTU Student Club on Facebook. You will see people posting these horror pictures of like these two students parked their bicycle in the middle of the street. Or this bathroom of the dorm has this horrible situation. Social sanctions, right? So at some sense, that actually works, right? Because now if my bicycle is photographed as parking the wrong place, or if I caused a mess in the bathroom and somebody posts that picture, or writes about, hey, it's midnight, why is room 305 or something still having a party? Yeah. I do think that these methods work to some extent, although some people just don't care, right? I mean, they have a face that's made of rhino skin or something. They don't lose face for being scolded at. So social sanction is the negative way of punishing, but there's also charities. If you donate to the university, we will put your name on the building. Actually, if you know, College of Law has 林则馆. Do you know why it's 林则馆? Because Cai Wanlin donated for that building, so it's 林则馆. And then the other building is called 万才馆, because Cai Wancai donated for that one. So that's also a way that you could do, from using these charities, you can help try to solve these externalities. The other one is, well, can self-interest solve this? So suppose you have related parties, can they try to make an arrangement? So for example, if you have a garden of apples and a group of bees, can the gardener strike a deal with the beekeepers to try to say, how about you bring your bees here to try to spread the pollen and so that the apples can blossom, and I'll pay you some money for that. So the question is, can these interest parties try to negotiate and strike a deal on themselves? Here we have a crazy theorem called the Coase theorem. So how crazy is this? So when Ronald Coase proposed this as a young man, he had a huge debate with all of the professors in the University of Chicago. It was reported that Milton Friedman was the last to be convinced, but all of them were convinced that he was right. But beforehand, everybody disagreed with him. So his claim is this: if private parties can bargain without cost over the allocations of resources, they can solve the problem of externalities on their own, regardless of how the property rights are distributed initially. So the claim here is that the only problem is the bargaining cost. If bargaining is costly, that's a problem. But if bargaining is not that costly, they can solve it themselves. And this is regardless of how property rights are assigned. So this is an outrageous claim. It's like externalities, not a problem. And of course, if the interest parties can reach an agreement, everybody's better off and the outcome is going to be efficient. So that's the essence of the claim. Okay, so to illustrate, let's think of this example. So let's say there are two people in this problem. Tao likes to play the piano, but Zara has to bear the cost for this music or noise, if you want it. Okay, so suppose the first scenario. Tao has the legal right to play the piano. The benefit for Tao to play the piano is, say, 5,000 NT dollars. But the cost for Zara to bear this music is 8,000 NT dollars. So the question is, can a private contract implement the efficient outcome? So yes or no, can a private contract implement the efficient outcome? And what is the efficient outcome? All right, so let's join the quiz. So Tao has the legal right to play the piano. Tao gets a $5,000 benefit for playing the piano, while Zara has to pay $8,000 to bear with this music. So can a private contract implement the efficient outcome? Either yes, the efficient outcome, Tao playing the piano, will be implemented, or yes, stop playing the piano will be implemented, or no on each case. Let's see. So the majority of you are answered that yes, the efficient outcome, Tao stop playing the piano will be implemented. And actually that's correct. Okay, so let's take a look. So the efficient outcome, because the benefit for Tao playing the piano for the whole society is Tao's happiness, valued at 5,000 NT dollars. And the cost for the society is Zara's endurance, 8,000 NT dollars. So the efficient outcome should be that Tao not playing the piano because the social benefit is smaller than the social cost. And if you think of it, suppose Zara says, hey Tao, I'll pay you $6,000, stop playing it. Well, Tao, because the benefit for Tao playing the piano is only 5,000 NT dollars, so he's better off, right? Getting $6,000. So that's better than playing the piano and enjoying that for a value of 5,000. And so, of course, will Zara make this offer? Because if Zara does not make this offer, she would have to bear the music, which costs her $8,000. So paying $6,000 for not paying this cost, good. So both are better off. So here, the efficient outcome could be implemented by a contract like this. Actually, so any price that's between 5,000 and 8,000 makes both sides better off. Of course, there might be a bargaining procedure and somebody might haggle. And so at what price would they reach an agreement is indeterminate. And this process may or may not be costly. So that's a problem. But if this cost is small enough, they reach an agreement, the efficient outcome will actually be implemented and it's good for everybody. Okay, next one. Now suppose Tao still has the right to play the piano, but now Tao gets $10,000 in happiness for playing the piano. So can a private contract implement the efficient outcome? Zara's cost for bearing for the music is still $8,000. So the only thing we changed is that the benefit for Tao is now $10,000. Okay, so now let's join the quiz. So yes, the efficient outcome, Tao playing the piano will be implemented, or yes, the efficient outcome that Tao stop playing the piano will be implemented, or no, the efficient outcome that Tao playing the piano cannot be implemented, or no, the efficient outcome that Tao stop playing the piano cannot be implemented, or I don't know. All right, so let's look at your answers. So the majority of you said no, Tao stop playing the piano cannot be implemented. But the answer is actually the second most frequent choice. Yes, the efficient outcome, Tao playing the piano, will be implemented. So here, Tao has the legal right to play the piano. It gets a $10,000 benefit for playing it. And Zara bears $8,000 cost for this music. The problem is this. Tao would turn down any offer below $10,000 because that's his benefit for playing the piano. Zero will not offer any amount beyond 8,000 because that's the cost. If Zero has to pay 9,000, Zero would say, forget it, I'll just bear with this. And so no agreement will be made between the two parties. However, well, Tao keeps playing the piano, and Zero has to move her tutoring business to the library. That is the efficient outcome. Because the social benefit for Tao playing the piano is $10,000, and the social cost is only $8,000. So just letting Tao play the piano, and Zero, sorry, you have to move your business, but that's fine. Or I mean, that is the efficient outcome. So even without the agreement, well, the efficient outcome is achieved. Okay, so now let's go to the last scenario. So we're back to the case. Okay, so Tao gets $8,000 benefit for playing the piano. Zero bears a $5,000 cost for this noise. But now let's say Zero can legally compel Tao to stop playing. So say the apartment has this agreement that, like say, after 8 p.m., everything has to be quiet or something like that. So can a private contract implement the efficient outcome? So again, the same choices. Yes, the efficient outcome that Tao playing the piano will be implemented, or yes, the efficient outcome that Tao stop playing the piano will be implemented, or no, the efficient outcome that Tao playing the piano cannot be implemented, or no, the efficient outcome that Tao stop playing the piano cannot be implemented. Okay, so yeah, so again, the answers are divided. And the answer is actually the efficient outcome that Tao playing the piano will be implemented. So let's take a look. Okay, first thing, what is the efficient outcome here? The social benefit is $8,000. That outweighs the social cost of $5,000. So even though legally Zero can legally compel Tao to stop playing, but the efficient outcome should be somehow Tao will be playing the piano. Question, can a private contract implement this efficient outcome? And how about this? How about Tao paying Zero $6,000 to live up with the loud music or move her tutoring business to the library? Will Zero accept this? Well, the cost of living up to put up with this music is $5,000. If Tao is going to pay Zero $6,000, Zero would accept it. And will Tao be willing to make this offer? Well, because the happiness for Tao to play the piano is $8,000, paying $6,000 for this to happen is also something that Tao is willing to do. So Tao keeps playing the piano. That's the efficient outcome. So okay, so here in the three examples, we see that regardless of what the efficient outcome is or how the legal rights are assigned, the efficient outcome is always implemented. That's the key essence of the Coase theorem. So the private market achieves the efficient outcome regardless of the initial distribution of rights. The initial property rights do affect sort of wealth distribution, because whoever gets the rights, the other party will have to pay that person to change the outcome. So if you have the property rights, then you will become richer by default, right? I mean, if you own a lot of land or houses in Taipei City, then you are richer. So property rights do affect people's wealth. But in terms of efficiency, the Coase theorem says either way is fine. Okay, so let's try to apply this. So think of a real question. The Zhou tribe has like roughly 1,000 residents. They value fishing in the clean Sun Moon Lake at 1 million NT dollars. Now suppose there's this annual Sun Moon Lake International Cross Lake Swimming Carnival, 永渡日月潭, that happens every year. But it's going to pollute the lake water because you have like thousands of people jumping into Sun Moon Lake and swimming across. The fishes are all die because of that. And to clean up, you require 500,000 NT dollars. So the first question is, can you describe a coast-like private solution to solve this issue? And then you can think about what are the possible reasons why this solution might not work in the real world. Okay, so the first thing, so describe a coast-like private solution. This is not a test, so you can type in your proposal here. So there's 1,000 residents of the Zhou tribe. They value fishing in a clean Sun Moon Lake at 1 million NT dollars. This annual event would pollute the lake water and would require 500,000 NT dollars for cleanup. Okay, so quite a few have already answered. You can continue to type in your answer. Let's look at some of them. So like Zhou tribe pays 600,000 to not hold the festival, gives 700,000 to swimmers for not swimming there. Participants pay to the tribe. The tribe pays for not holding the carnival. Residents of the Zhou tribe pay the swimmers to do the cleanup. The total benefit is still above zero. Swimmers will have to pay fees for participating. All right, so notice that in reality, the first question we have to ask is, who has the property rights? So does the Zhou tribe have, to say, claiming that this is the traditional area of these aboriginals, so they have the property right for Sun Moon Lake, or does, like say, I believe it's local government that's holding this festival, so do they have the right to actually hold this event? It's really not clear. Yeah, but the key thing is that if the property right is clear, for example, if the Zhou tribe has property rights to a clean Sun Moon Lake, then of course, whoever's going to hold this event will have to pay $500,000 to clean up the lake afterwards. And of course, it's likely that the participants now will have to pay this. In addition to the fee to join, they have to also pay the cleanup fee. And of course, because the benefit for a clean Sun Moon Lake outweighs the cost, so even if this event's going to happen, it's going to be cleaned up right afterwards. So the efficient outcome will be implemented. But even if, like say, the Nantou government has the property right to do this event, because the Zhou tribe, they find that it is better to clean up, so they will try to raise the $500,000 cost to clean up afterwards. So the cleanup will still happen, and so the efficient outcome is implemented. But the key question about the property rights is who's going to pay for that? Is it the participants of the swimming event, or is it the Zhou tribe? All right, so now let's move on to the next question. Can you think of any reasons why this solution might not work in the real world? Okay, so a lot of answers have come in. So if you're still typing, please continue. Let's look at some of these answers. The biggest one is people would have different opinions. So conflict of interest, debatable property rights. Every party has different interests and object. The number of people wanting the event to be held exceeds the tribe resident by a lot. We will hold a referendum. Should we have this event? The tribes would lose because there are thousands of people who swim in Sun Moon Lake every year, but there's only 1,000 Zhou tribe members. The government values the carnival more than a clean environment. That's also a problem. Humans are greedy. I love this. Humans are selfish by nature. The carnival is viewed as a tradition. But the Zhou tribe would say, hey, we have an even bigger tradition, right? We've been fishing since 100 years ago, right? Oh, I love this. The cost of negotiation is too high. Yeah, that could be a good reason that this is a problem. Because if you think of it, to negotiate across like 1,000 residents of the Zhou tribe with like thousands of swimmers, that's also a problem. We have no idea who owns the property right initially. Yeah, that's also an issue. There are more people that want the festival to be held. Holding the carnival gains extra benefit, such as fame. Yeah, that's a good issue. There could be external benefits because of this event held in Sun Moon Lake. And remember, we just went through externalities, so that's also an issue. But here, one thing is that I do think that the Nantou government would take into account the fame that's created by this event when they do their calculations. All right, so let's look at some things. The key problem here is possible high transaction costs. Because to reach a final agreement on who's going to pay how much, this bargaining process is not painless. I mean, it's painful. It's costly to do that. And especially here, as I mentioned, property rights are not clear. The tribe members would claim that, yeah, this is our traditional area, and so we have the property rights. But the local government might think otherwise. There could also be stubbornness. Suppose 999 of the Zhou tribe members agree, but the chieftain or the last person just decides, I just don't agree. This is our traditional area, no compromise. Then you're stuck. You see this a lot in the city renovation projects when you want to tear down a whole building of apartments, but then the last apartment owner says, no, I'm already 80 years old. I'm going to live until I die. And then you have to wait, I don't know, depending on how long this person lives. If he or she lives exactly the average life expectancy, then it's like maybe 5 to 10 years. But if he lives up to 100, then it's going to be 20 years and it's going to take forever. And there's also this problem of coordination problem, right? Because there's a large number of interest parties. And so to coordinate everybody is a big problem. Think of the issue of renovating a whole building. I mean, this resident is the age of 80, and the other one is 60, right? When the 80 guy passes away, but then his or her son would move in, which is like 50 or something. By then, the 60 guy is already turned 70, and so he says, no, I have to live until I die. And then you have to wait for that guy to pass away. But then by that time, the son of the 80 guy is now turning 65 or something, and then this can just take forever. So you have this huge coordination problem, especially if you have like 1,000 tribal members versus like thousands of swimmers. Okay, so the last question of this, your father is reading your home property tax bill. On the property tax bill, there's a deduction if the property owner has done anything to beautify his property. If your parents spend 20,000 NT dollars on landscaping, they can reduce their tax bill by 50% of that amount, which is 10,000 NT dollars. So the true cost of landscaping was only $10,000. And your dad says, this is an outrage. If someone wants to improve his house, it's no one's business but his own. I remember some of my college economics, and I know that taxes and subsidies are always inefficient. So that's your dad. So what would you say? So what is the city government trying to subsidize with this tax break? And what is the externality that this subsidy is trying to internalize? And although taxes and subsidies usually create inefficiencies, are taxes and subsidies always inefficient? Why or why not? Okay, so what is the city government trying to subsidize here with this tax break? Okay, so the answers are coming in. That's very good. Beautiful looking of the community. The city landscape and recognition of the city. Beautiful living environment. Yeah, make the environment more beautiful. Aesthetics, yeah, that's right. A fine city appearance, yeah. Okay, yeah, so here you immediately see that actually you might have noticed there are some small pieces of land in Taipei City that used to be just abandoned, but now they're turned into small parks. And of course, that's thanks to some subsidy. But of course, that means that you will find more parks, small parks in the city at different places. So there is this external benefit that the city government is trying to subsidize, because having a good landscape is actually good. So the next question, what is the externality that the subsidy is trying to internalize? No, not pollution, carbon emissions, but this should be something that's good. So during the break, please answer the last question. Although taxes and subsidies usually create inefficiencies, are taxes and subsidies always efficient? Why or why not? So here we have a lot of the answers, but I think most of you got this right, that taxes and subsidies might be problematic in the normal case, but with externalities, you could have what we call corrective taxes or corrective subsidies that could actually restore inefficiency. All right, so let's move on. So to summarize, we talked about externality in this chapter with negative, like pollution, negative externalities, where social optimal quantity is lower than the market outcome. Or there could be positive externalities where the socially optimal quantity is higher than the market quantity. So to solve this, we can have regulations or corrective taxes or tradable pollution permits. These are public policies on this. And there could also be private solutions. For example, the cost theorem. Actually, another way to internalize is to just have the parties merge. This would happen in firms. So my summary for this, I want to note, is that traditionally we called externalities a type of market failure, but it's actually lack of market that's causing the problem because we don't have well-defined property rights. And so the social benefit and social costs do not equate to private benefits and private costs. And so to solve this, we prefer what we call market-based public policy, like corrective taxes and tradable pollution permits. And there's also the private solution based on the cost theorem. So here's the homework for chapter 10. And also here you see how much I love externalities. It came up almost every year in the past midterms. Now we should move on. So what's your personal take on carbon tax policy? Which do you prefer? I think I already expressed this, but I love tradable permit markets because it's a canonical example of what we call market design. You try to create a market because the problem is a lack of market. There are a lot of details to work out, but once you create the market, so you do not need to know the exact amount to tax. Well, you need a very correct estimate of the external costs to tax, like say, pollution correctly. But with the market, well, the market price will figure that out. So that I love this. All right, so that's the end of chapter 10.